All right, we good? There we go. Well, hey, is the mic on here? Doesn't sound like we're on. Oh, it's not a PA. All right, there we go. There we go. Well, hey, good morning. I want to thank you all for being here. And I'm standing here with so many of my colleagues on the steps of our state capitol, asking those currently in leadership of the chamber right behind me to do the right thing. Bring forward our resolution that, 1, condemns the brutal acts of terror committed by Hamas, calls for the release, 2, of those in hostage, and 3, reaffirms our state's support for Israel. And frankly, it's awful that we even have to make this request. It should not be controversial or complicated to condemn what we witnessed in Israel last week. If you watch the videos or see photographs from last week's atrocity, it turns your stomach and it makes your heart break. It's hard to watch, it's hard to see. Children were murdered. Over 100 hostages remain in captivity, and at least 30 Americans were slaughtered. There is no excuse for this type of barbaric activity. There is no explaining or rationalizing those brutal acts of terror. When we see such horrific violence, it is incumbent upon our state government to lead, not to wobble, to clearly condemn wrong when we see it, not to equivocate. That is why we have drafted a resolution that does just that. It calls a spade a spade. Evil acts of terror were committed by Hamas. Yet sadly, the Democrat leadership of the Michigan House of Representatives, they refuse to take a stand. They refuse to condemn these acts and refuse to call for the release of those civilians currently held in hostage. And that is a moral failure. That is not leadership. That is wrong. And that failure, it resonates and reflects so poorly on our state. Is this really the message that we want to send to those who lost loved ones? Is this how we want our nation and our world to look at our state? By remaining silent, it appears as if our state government is afraid and unwilling to condemn the largest killing of Jewish civilians since the Holocaust. So no, we cannot remain silent. We cannot afford to equivocate. It is important that we condemn the abhorrent, barbaric violence and reaffirm our support for Israel to defend itself. This is not complicated. It should not be controversial. And because of that, I want to address just some of the thinly veiled criticisms lobbed at our effort here as well. So first off, I worked as an intelligence officer with the Defense Intelligence Agency in the Middle East, working on counterterrorism issues. I am familiar with the political dynamics and the lengthy history of the region. And we're not trying to legislate a peace plan here. We are attempting to condemn brutal acts of terror. If this legislature cannot even do that, we truly have no leg to stand on at all. And secondly, the state legislature, they've approved over 120 resolutions this year alone. And the Michigan State House, it has a long history of approving resolutions relating to international affairs, including in this very session. And it is insulting, it's frankly callous to claim that we can do something like approve a resolution to declare Tennis Month, but we cannot approve a resolution that condemns the brutal acts of terrorism that we witnessed. So with my colleagues standing behind me here today, we want to say with a unified voice to Speaker Tate, do the right thing. Stand with Israel and stand against terrorism. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Donnie Steele for a statement.
Thank you, Representative Schuette, for organizing this event and asking me to speak. I came to Lansing to represent the people of District 54. Today, I am standing to give a voice to the heartbreak and trauma felt by the Jewish community in my district and all of us who has watched the horror that has been through the attacks that have taken place. Our families, friends, and neighbors all across Michigan and the world watched as mass atrocities perpetuated by the Hamas terrorists. They were carried out indiscriminately against the Israel people. I watched in horror as my fellow women, my fellow mothers were gunned down trying to protect their children. That horror has impacted me the most after these attacks. I cannot fathom the fear or pain hearing the alarms of militarized combatants that are rushing into their city. Can you imagine if that was happening in our city? That wasn't fear enough. The Hamas terrorists persisted and attacked families inside their homes, behind locked doors. The place, our homes, above all else, that innocent civilians should have been safe. The one thing mothers across the world have in common, from Michigan to Israel, is a never-ending commitment to keep our kids safe. Hamas, in addition to killing more than 1,400 people, kidnapping 200 others, stripped every Israel mother of the one most basic human right and instinct, and that is the ability to keep and protect our children safe in our homes. Seeing the horror undergone by my fellow women, our fellow mothers, and watching our children has weighed me beyond belief. I have seen the photos and the videos where women were kidnapped, beaten, and murdered for the one thing that they are, women, taking care of their families and their homes. I've heard about how mothers were gunned down just trying to protect their kids for being a part of a specific faith. Those images, those stories have shaken my community, and they are forever burned in my memory. I want us to do everything that we can for those who feel traumatized and targeted, that they are not alone. I want to show the world that Michigan, all of Michigan, stands for the victims, and that we are joining the rest of the world in calling for the safe release of those men, women, and children who were taken hostage. So today, thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody else being here. Thank you for listening to us stand to please hear our voices and the communities of voices within our communities, and ask Speaker Tate to stand with us and condemn these violent attacks. Let's put aside any internal squabbles and show that we stand for these innocent families who are irreparably damaged by the actions of the Hamas terrorists. Thank you for being here.
All right, State Representative Graham Filler here. I've got a story about my father, which I'm going to share with you, and let you know kind of what I'm doing up here. But my father was born in Moldova in 1911, and he was born to a Jewish family. And like many Jews from between 1900 and 1920, when they felt war and ethnic cleansing and danger coming, they came to America. And so eventually he settled in Philadelphia, and eventually I was born in 1983. My father was 71 when I was born. I'm the last of 9 kids, 3 marriages. He was quite a guy, I guess, I'll say. And when I grew up, I was told I could be Jewish or a Protestant like my mother, and whatever religion I choose. So I chose Protestantism. But because with all my half siblings being Jewish, my father, of course, I felt this remarkable closeness with the Jewish community, with the country of Israel. And people have been talking maybe in the last week, who speaks for the Jews, who speaks for Jewish people. And I think it's sort of missing the point here, because that's not what we should be talking about. What we're doing today and for the past couple weeks is condemning evil and condemning terrorism and a terrorist organization, which I don't think is a big stretch for this body. I remember standing when Russia invaded Ukraine, and we stood and we said we stand against unprompted war against independent countries. And so I don't feel like this resolution is so far out the box. And whether it's a resolution or whether it's speeches on the House floor, it's incredibly powerful when a legislature stands up and says the acts of terror are unacceptable and these acts are a threat to peace everywhere. And by making that legislative statement, we stand with our constituents who are calling for peace, and we signal to our congressional representatives that they should also stand with Israel and against terror. And I hope this bipartisan resolution will gain traction. I want to thank you all for coming today, and thank you for letting me tell my story. And we will take some questions if you have any.
So, what our resolution very clearly states is, one, it condemns the horrific acts of violence that we witnessed committed by Hamas. Two, it calls for the release of hostages. There are nearly 200 civilians still in hostage. And three, it does assert that Israel has a right to defend itself against acts of terror. So that's what this resolution does here today. Yeah. So, what I can say, Joe, is that I'm not Jewish, and I don't presume to speak for the Jewish people. I also can't expect to know the depths of the pain that Jewish people have gone through after witnessing these attacks. But it shouldn't matter your ethnicity. It shouldn't matter your nationality to condemn the horrible acts that we saw perpetrated in Israel last week. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first person I sent a draft of the resolution when I had it was Samantha Steckloff. I was also had conversations with Jeremy Moss about that. I was working on the resolution. Noah Arbit is a co-sponsor as well, and Samantha, when I talked to her over the weekend, thanked me for what we were doing. So, it's unfortunate that politics get drawn into what is really should be non-controversial. That's condemning acts of terror. I think that'd be a great question for Speaker Tate, for the floor leader, those who direct our House agenda. It shouldn't be controversial at all. I don't think there's anything insensitive about condemning the horrible acts of violence that we saw. I don't think there's anything insensitive about calling for the release of hostages. So, yeah. If we want to have a conversation about a separate resolution, that's fine. But we're having a conversation right now about a response to the horrific acts of violence that we saw committed last week in Israel. We saw, children murdered. We saw elderly attacked in their homes. The deliberate targeting of civilians, that's not excusable. We can't equivocate on this. We can't wobble. Yeah, we can have conversations. We should not have our hearts and our prayers go out to everyone afflicted in the region. But it's important to deliberately call out and condemn the acts of violence that we witnessed.
Yeah, we continue to talk to them and just bring up that this caucus stands against terrorism, and we want them to stand with us. And we don't think it's complicated. I know it's a very nuanced and fluid situation, but we think the resolution as it stands sort of stands on its own. And so, as I mentioned, I would take statements on the floor. I know the House is a little different than the Senate, where they can give statements at the end, but I just think it's really powerful when we stand up in this very public body and speak against the terrorism.
We got time for 2 more questions.
I don't think there's that much more to do. I've reached out to people who represent work for my congressmen, just let them know my support of some of this. But yeah, there's not a whole lot beyond. We'd like to give a bigger voice to this resolution. Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Are you Jewish? Fly away.
You know I am. I know. That's why I'm like,
Anybody?
Good, no, well, good job.
I mean, my grandmother